The Bruins missed the playoffs for the first time in 9 years last year. It was pretty unorthodox. Not something that Bruins fans are very familiar with, especially Bruins fans of my generation or younger. In fact, they weren't even really close. They finished 15th in the Eastern Conference. And let's be honest, they didn't really get better in this offseason. And yet there are still plenty of optimistic Bruins fans. I've even seen some people that cover the team that really think the Bruins can make a push towards the postseason this year, that this team can make the playoffs. When you look at the fire sale they had at the trade deadline and the lack of needle-moving moves that they made in the offseason, if you want to get the playoffs back to the Garden, you're going to need to look internally. You're going to need to look within. Players who were on the team last year are going to need to step up this year. So my question then becomes, what player is it? What player holds the cards here? What player can single-handedly change the Bruins' fortunes and take them back where they belong, being in the playoffs, and then disappointing us, not before the playoffs? Who can do that? Who can erase this deficit and get the Bruins there? Of course, what Bruins fans are going to say is David Pastrnak, right? He's the best player on the team, top 5 offensive player in the sport. He worked absolute miracles last year, especially after the trade deadline, to get to his 100-point season and to get Morgan Geekie to 30 goals and get him a payday. It's not just about Pasternak's stats. He's improving his team. The Bruins go as Pasta goes until the tail end of last year when Pasta was going really hot and the Bruins still couldn't win because they just had nothing around him. He is the franchise. Probably should be the captain because of that. And he is certainly the only player the opposing coaches key in on when you're taking out the whiteboard. And yet they still can't stop him. All that said, clearly, David Pastrnak is the key to getting the Bruins into the playoffs as the best player, right? Wrong. Incorrect. The idea that if David Pastrnak just goes nuclear, that the Bruins have a chance is a stupid idea. You know why? He already went nuclear. He scored 106 points last year on the worst Bruins team in 20 years. He led the league in even strength goals playing alongside Morgan Geekie and Pavel Zacha. He is one of the top 5 offensive players in the league. I just don't know how much more you can ask of David Pastrnak. I don't know how much more you can get out of David Pastrnak. I think he carried you as far as he could on his lonesome in the last couple of months of the season. And it only got you to 76 points. I mean, you can't blame him. He did what he could. He scored. He made his teammates better. It's not like he was just the villain in a sports movie. He was in it for himself. One star forward does not get you there. This is not basketball. So yes, David Pastrnak is the best player on the Bruins team. You need Pastrnak to have a really good season, as we're accustomed to, for the Bruins to even have a shot to get back to the postseason. But he is not the one that can carry them. You just can't do it in this league. Not with a star winger like Pastrnak. And who knows what Pasternak's future is with the Bruins, by the way, if this continues to get worse. We'll talk about that another day. But as much as I want to say it's Pastrnak, that's not the answer. This is not a one-player kind of sport, except for one position. Okay? David Pastrnak is not the answer to the Bruins player who can single-handedly take them to the playoffs. The real answer for the one Boston Bruins player who could single-handedly lead them into the playoff discussion is Jeremy Swayman. Need not look any further than the goaltender. There are 2 positions in all of the North American major sports who have their own records. It's pitchers in baseball, and it's the goaltender in hockey. And while the NHL, it's not super important that you have a great goaltender in order to make a run. I mean, look, the Oilers have made the final the last 2 years. Corey Crawford was the goaltender in a dynasty. He and Antti Niemi. You know, you don't need to have a Vezina winning goalie. to be a Stanley Cup winner or a Stanley Cup contender. But if you're trying to go from a bad team to a good team, that's where you kind of have to start. That's the one who can make the most impact with not much else around him. Jeremy Swayman is the answer. If the Bruins are going to make the jump from 15th in the Eastern Conference to a playoff spot in 1 year, with a couple of guys coming back from injury, but with less skill than you started last year with, Jeremy Swayman is the answer. I mean, pretty simple here. He followed up a career year and a career contract with a career worst year and career worst criticism. Don Sweeney paid him superstar money, gave him a superstar workload, and got e-bug stats. You know it by now. Swayman led the league in goals against last year, was under a .900 save percentage for the first time in his career, and over 3 goals a game for the first time in his career. In hockey, the only singular player who can come close to erasing a 15-point deficit in the standings is the goaltender, especially the way the Bruins have put an emphasis on that position the last 15, 20 years. Besides that, it's a generational prospect. Like we're talking Crosby, McKinnon, McDavid, those kind of guys, sure. And by the way, Crosby and McDavid, it took a couple years. And Crosby had Lemieux on his team. He had Evgeny Malkin on his team. He had Marc-Andre Fleury on his team. It takes a couple years. Unless it's the goalie. If David Pastrnak goes nuclear next season, it doesn't mean the Bruins get any better. He went nuclear last season and they had 76 points. If Jeremy Swayman goes nuclear this year, that makes a huge difference. That could get them where they need to go, which this year was 91 points. A 15-point difference. The only one who can steal points on your roster is a goalie, especially one who we know can be a good goalie, who we know can be an all-star caliber Vezina votes kind of goaltender like Jeremy Swayman. Swayman obviously had the bigger workload last year than ever. He made the jump from 43 starts 2 years ago to 58 starts last year after the big contract. Surely that's crazy for a goalie at his age to make that jump and be successful. Right? Like, as much as we want to put it all on Swayman, the fact that he played that much for the first time in his career, we can't blame him for not having a good year, right? Also wrong. Why don't we look a couple hours to the north in Montreal, where it's even more of a pressure cooker? It's the biggest pressure cooker in the league. In Montreal, Sam Montbo made the jump from 40 starts to 60 starts this past season for the first time in his career. Not 15 more starts like Swayman, but 20 more. Third in the NHL in games started this past year. Yet, had a .900 save percentage and a career best 282 goals against. First time he's been under 3 in his whole career. And looking at his team, the Habs also made the jump from 76 points to 91 points. The exact point total the Bruins had this year to the exact point total they would have needed to make the postseason, because Montreal was the one with 91. Like, you want to see an example right there of how a young, inexperienced team can make a jump from bad, bottom of the barrel bad, to the postseason in 1 year by their goaltender? You've got an example in your own division from your most cherished rivals. Montreal did it no more than a few months ago. Now, are these teams apples to apples? No, they're not. Okay, and I'm sure people are going to be getting in the comments saying that. Okay, the Canadiens, they have a lot more young talent than the Bruins have. Very inexperienced. You know, Nick Suzuki had a terrific year. Ivan Demidov comes in at the end of the year. Lane Hudson wins the Calder for Rookie of the Year as a defenseman. He really came on in the second half of the season. And so there are definitely other things. But we're talking about just making a jump into relevancy. into being in the playoff picture. And if there's one guy, when you look at the Canadiens who made a huge jump, it's Sam Montembeault, the goaltender, who's only 2 years older than Swayman. It's not like he's 35. All right, he's still a guy who's still played the same amount of seasons, still young in his career, and he makes that jump, has one of the biggest workloads in the entire league, and he takes it on. He has a great year. Can Jeremy Swayman do that for the Bruins this year? That might be their only hope of getting to the postseason. And look, there are good things that you can point to for Swayman, other than the fact that, hey, he probably just won't be that bad again, right? But he had a terrific World Championships. Oh, who cares about that tournament? Who plays at that tournament? NHL guys do play at that tournament, okay? And they won the gold for the first time in 90 some odd years. And Jeremy Swayman pitched a shutout in the gold medal game. And he was fantastic in the tournament. He had one bad game, I think the first start he had. And after that, he was completely lights out. And he's going to have a preseason this year, which he didn't have last year. That's his own fault. Not giving him a pass, but he didn't have a preseason because of this holdout, which got more and more ridiculous by the day. And the Bruins in front of him were a mess last year, of course, mainly in attack. But certainly they weren't one of the best defensive teams in the league. But with some guys coming back from injury, Charlie McAvoy, Hampus Lindholm, you look out there, Sway, you've got a pretty comparable decor to what you had in 23-24. When you had the All-Star season, when you carried the Bruins to a first-round victory over the Leafs. It's pretty similar. When you were the best goaltender in the playoffs that year and only played 2 rounds, 13 games. 12 games, actually. Ullmark started game 2 of the Toronto series. Does it help that he doesn't have a good tandem partner? No, it doesn't. It does not help. But then again, I'll look north again to Montreal. Who's Sam Montembeault's backup? Who's his tandem guy? They made the postseason. Who is Linus Ullmark's tandem guy? They made the postseason. And Linus Ullmark was a huge reason why. That doesn't make Jeremy Swayman or Don Sweeney look better. But you want to talk about another team in your own division that made the jump from lottery team to playoffs in 1 year. Linus Ullmark for the Ottawa Senators did that. Right? They jumped up 14 points. Bruins need to make up 15. You've got 2 teams in your own division that have the blueprint. And I think more specifically with Ullmark and the Senators, I don't know how much better they got for skaters this past year. They already had that young core. Stützle had a better year, but you already had Stützle. You already had Tkachuk. You already had Sanderson. You already had Shane Pinto. You added Linus Ullmark. There's no more important position in the Bruins right now than getting a bounce-back year from Jeremy Swayman. That's the only guy on your roster who can have a great year and single-handedly kind of take you to the playoffs. Jeremy Swayman's the answer. I did have a thought for Elias Lindholm, by the way. You know, if he gets better, if he becomes a 60 to 65-point guy, which I think is still a tough ask, because I just don't think he is that. I think he was that for 2 seasons when he had a couple of Hall of Fame caliber players around him. But I don't think he's that. But if Elias Lindholm can be that, let's just say he's a 65-point guy. He's number 1 center. Then all of a sudden you have a pretty good first line. All-time good? No. President's Trophy good? No. Playoff good? Probably. Pastrnak, Elias Lindholm at 65 points, and Morgan Geekie somewhere near 30 goals again? That's a pretty good one. And if Elias Lindholm's getting better, that means he can play on the power play, which was awful for the Bruins last year. 17%, one of the worst marks in the league. And I think we all know as hockey fans, if you have a pretty daunting first line and you have a good power play unit, you can sneak into the playoffs. You can. And obviously he's a pretty dang good penalty killer either way. So he's got the defensive part. You got a killer first line, got a couple checking lines in there. Even in 2025, that could get you into the postseason. But you need not look any further than your goaltender, just like we have for the Bruins for the last 20 years. They've had some Hall of Famers all around the place, but when they don't have good goaltending seasons, they don't have good seasons. Period. Full stop. If you get that this year, if you get the bounce back from Jeremy Swayman and get the Swayman that we have seen, that we did see 2 years ago, then maybe the Bruins do make this interesting. Maybe they do challenge Montreal and Ottawa for those final wild card spots. Maybe it's Tampa. Maybe they take a step back. Maybe it's Toronto without Mitch Marner. Maybe they take a huge step back. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If anybody on this Bruins team, obviously you need a lot of guys to step up. I think that's kind of the hidden main point in all of this. But if there's going to be one guy who's going to have a huge bounce back season and can carry the Bruins there to the playoffs, who is it and why? Let me know in the comment section below. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. It's completely free, and we come at you live on YouTube every weekday, high noon Eastern time, and then wherever you get your podcasts as well. I'm your host, Cam Stewart. Zach Burke keeps us on the air. Check out the other videos on the channel, talking Bruins, hockey, Red Sox, everything else going on in the world of Boston sports.